Good afternoon and welcome to the Fargo Human Relations Commission meeting. It is Thursday, February 20th. We currently do not have quorum, but we are expecting our quorum-making commissioner to join us shortly, so we just won't conduct business until he arrives. Welcome again. My name is Barry Nelson. I'm chair of the Fargo Human Relations Commission. And if we could start with you, Commissioner Strand.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm John Strand. I'm the liaison from the Fargo City Commission to this committee.
Thank you.
Matora Alier, the vice chair for this committee.
Adam Martin, member of the Human Relations Commission.
Rachel Hoffman, member.
Thank you very much. And if we could have staff introduce themselves as well.
Tia Brasa, Fargo Planning.
Catlin Christie, Fargo Planning.
Karen Flum, Fargo Planning.
Miranda Wolf, Fargo Planning.
Bruce Tarleson, City Fargo Inspection Department. I'm the director.
Thank you, Bruce. Welcome.
Donald Kress, City Fargo Planning Department and Census Complete Count.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you, sir.
Might you, our next, I'm going to bypass the approval of the agenda and the minutes until we do achieve quorum, but would either of you be a public to have comment? Our next item is public comment. I don't see public in the audience, so unless there is anyone that's running through the door, we'll dispense with that. I regret to say that I was really excited about the fact that we were going to have the North Department of Labor and Human Rights Commissioner Erica Thunder join us today to introduce herself and her department and to have a conversation with us. She let me know this morning that she had lost her voice and did not feel she would be very good at presenting, so she's not joining us today. So we have more time to spend on our other agenda items. And so we might move into item number 6, which is the, no, here we go. I think what we'll do, so I'm going to hold on the presentation for the census, if you don't mind, Tia, and we'll do their business items. Welcome, Cody. I'm going to let you get seated, and then we're going to go into our 2 business items. So actually, would you, when you catch your breath, if you introduce yourself?
Sure. Cody Severson, member.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go back to we do have a printed agenda in front of us, and I'm just looking for any amendments to the agenda. I already mentioned that our program is not going to be with us today, but I ask with that adjustment approval of the agenda.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Mature.
I'll second.
Rachel, thank you. All in favor of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And then we have also in written form our minutes from the December 19th, 2019 meeting. Again, we did not have a January meeting because of the MLK Day celebration. So if you've had a chance to look at the printed minutes, I'm again looking for a motion to approve.
I will motion.
Thank you, Rachel.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mature. Is there any comments or discussion? If not, all those in favor of the minutes from December indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. So now let's move into our presentation on the 2020 census. Donald Kress and Tia Brasa, we invite you and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, commissioners. I believe that Donald and I have been here before, maybe a few months ago, kind of just giving the overall idea of what census is about and why it's important for our 2020 count. And today we are here again just to give you a recap on why it's important and to let you know about some job recruitment that the census needs help with. And if you recall, Donald Kress, he's also from our planning department.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, commissioners, for having us before you again today. Just before we start on the jobs presentation here. Just note that one of the things, our Complete Count Committee is charged with outreach to hard-to-count populations. And one of our mechanisms to reach out to the new Americans is to make a short video in several different languages, which we did some of this morning. Some of the presenters include Matur and Abdewali here, who very generously helped us out in their own languages. We got through Dinka, Somali, Kinyarwandi, Kurdish, and Somali this morning. And I don't know that we would like to do some other languages. I don't know if we have time with our production staff to schedule another round of these and some additional languages, but those will be appearing on our census website and will also be available to those communities for part of their outreach, which they're already actively doing. As Commissioner Allaire was describing some of the things he's doing in his community there, which is really a great leadership thing to be doing, and as part of the outreach. So we certainly appreciate all those of you who are doing that. That's very motivated, and that's very great thing for the city as a whole. That's that's going to benefit everyone here to have a complete count and everyone confident that they can answer the census comfortably. That's very important. So we appreciate everyone's work on that. This census job situation here, this is actually from a training we went to in Bismarck a couple of weeks ago that was put on by the North Dakota Department of Commerce. And it talks about census employment opportunities in North Dakota. As you may know, the census, this is now the U.S. Census, this is a federal job, employs a lot of people to go out and do a lot of things door to door. Though the primary goal is to have everyone respond online to the census realizes that that's not going to happen. Not everybody's going to be able to do that, or for one reason or another. And so there are going to be people going out, they call them enumerators, to go out and actually go knocking on doors after April 1st to find, find information, census information on folks who hadn't responded by the April 1st ideal deadline there of the census. So these jobs are obviously temporary, but they can run as late as July 31st. The census actually, we try to get everybody to respond by April 1st, but the actual census goes on till July 31st. And as you see there, the pay rate is $18 to $23 an hour. You do get mileage for your vehicle. There is some health insurance available, and there are some office jobs in Bismarck Census Office, but the ones in Fargo would be out in the field, and they will train you on this. Again, just take a look there. You get a chance to work with the community. You all know how important the census is and the complete count is, and we are able to have a pretty good pay rate here. I believe our census office in Bismarck got a little higher pay here for North Dakota because it is very competitive here, as you know, in the job market. So we had a little better pay to encourage people to do this. You can do this part-time. Sorry, going the wrong direction. Here are the requirements. This is on the census website too, but you do need to be at least 18 years old, but you could still be in high school. If you have some folks in high school or early college, that'd be a great opportunity for them. You do have to be a U.S. citizen, and for men, you have to be registered for the Selective Service, the Federal Selective Service, and then there are the rest of the requirements there. And you can apply online. You do this all online. There is eventually a security check, a background check, if you're offered a job, but there is no cost to you for that. They provide us a contractor, and so you don't have to pay for fingerprinting or go through any cost for the security check. I know in some jobs you have to pay for your own security check. So here's some contact information here. Census 2020 census.gov/jobs, and then a phone number, and there's also a text for the North Dakota jobs there. And then we talked about the pay rates there. That's a range of pay rates. I don't know what each individual job pays, but there's a pretty good rate there. And that was the background on that. So I believe, Chairman Nelson, you said you've been involved with the census. You're involved with the census yourself. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
So is this your first time doing that? Or?
It is, yeah.
And I
First time
imagine-
it would work into my schedule, so I'm waiting on the response to my background check, so.
Okay. So I would imagine you're pretty excited to working with a community like that.
Yeah, I think it would be a great opportunity.
And the folks in Bismarck, when they talked to us, said that if you're associated with a particular community, you know, a perhaps particular cultural community, they will make an effort to assign you to work with that community. So that can, you know, again, be part of their outreach as well as our outreach. Again, these are jobs with the United States government. They are not City of Fargo jobs. They're with the U.S. government. So you'd have to deal with them on that. Tia, did you have any more?
The only thing I'd like to add is that website that he posted, if you can pull it back up, has a really great FAQ section for anybody that's interested and may have various questions. It's pretty good and comprehensive.
So I did see the news release that talked about that there was a particular need still for workers in North Dakota and Minnesota.
Yes, sir, that's
with the competitive. So I'm assuming they're still taking applications.
Yes, sir, that's
obviously.
correct. That's correct. And so again, probably the best resource would be the 2020census.gov website. If you do have some other questions, you feel free to ask us on the Complete Count Committee if you have some other questions you don't feel are answered by that. But we do encourage, again, it's all ages, all backgrounds with the certain limitations on citizenship and the selective service registration and the 18-year-old minimum age limit. But it's a real great opportunity to get involved in the community. And I think the census is hoping that you'll be back in 2030. The next round, I know some people who have done this for 2 or 3 censuses, and it evolves. This census, again, our focus is responding online. It's very different than the 2010 census in a way that the focus is rather different. We're doing our outreach. I was not here in 2010, but I understand from our more senior staff that have been here, you know, for more than 10 years that. Even our outreach is much more diverse in this year than it maybe had a chance to be earlier. We were told at this Bismarck training that in 2010 there were 4 complete count committees in North Dakota. This year there are 40 plus a state one. So that's really different, and it just shows how much bigger we are, how much more diverse we are, how much more motivated we are to get ourselves involved in an accurate and complete count. Commissioner, do you have any questions we can help you with?
I guess I did have one. I know in previous times that one of the maybe greatest reasons for reluctance for people to respond to the census is fearful of how this information will be used and whether or not that would create some identifying information that would cause difficulty down the road. I'm assuming that's kind of being addressed, and that's why there's such an emphasis on this to try to move beyond the possible mistrust of the process.
Yes, sir. That's actually included in our basic statement here. The census takes this information. They are prohibited by law for revealing personal information. You become a statistic, basically, as opposed to putting your name and address and phone number on some website for people to get at. So that is part of our message there and part of our outreach.
Good. Other questions from the commissioners? If not, thank you very much for presenting today.
Thank you for letting us be in front of you. And if you do have more questions on the census or the Complete Count Committee or what we're doing for outreach or ideas for outreach, please contact us. Thank you, sir.
And I guess I thought of one more question.
Okay.
And that would be just, I mean, the importance of all this is that certainly in order for, I mean, there's money involved here. I mean,
Yes, sir.
In order for people to be counted, it really does address how much money might be flowing through government entities.
Yes, sir. So many things, so many government programs that touch all aspects of our life. Infrastructure, the city commissioners are certainly concerned with federal money that aids transportation and infrastructure. It aids education, healthcare, all kinds of programs. Every state has them, every city has them. Virtually everyone is touched by them, and that is based on census. And in North Dakota, we're considerably larger than we were in 2010, we believe, because partly of the oil boom and partly just with our general growth here. So we're excited to see how many more people there really are. This is going to be a big census for all of us, and it's going to be very revealing about our state. It's going to be a different picture than 2010. So thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you for presenting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm remembering a story from back when, and one of our state leaders used to make reference to, but there was a census in North Dakota, and so I'm going to guess it was 50 or 60, 1950 or 60, because I don't know if it was later, that according to this individual, who's a real prominent leader, there were 64 African Americans in the entire state.
Wow. And we do believe there are more now.
There are more now. Yeah,
Very approximate value.
the world has come to us.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move into something new we're doing this month, and it's called in your agenda, January recap. And both to make sure that we reflect that things certainly, business happens between our commission meetings and having active members of the community on the commission. There are things that all of us notice are happening and are being addressed back to staff. And so we have a list of items that have come up since our last meeting, particularly 2 months ago. So I'm not sure how we would maybe want to address them, but maybe point by point and just see if there's anything that people would like to further discuss, and we might have input with individuals here. And I particularly appreciate Ms. Tarleson for you to join us, because I'm going to kick it off with number one, which is, and this is something that I had talked to staff about when the news story came out about the violations found for ADA at the Shack, which is the Bison basketball court. And I was particularly mindful that when that building first opened, we had one of our former commissioners come to our meeting, who is also an avid Bison fan. And he came in and after years of challenging the deficits in the Fargo Dome, he had gone to a basketball game at the Shack, and he is an individual who is in a wheelchair, and said there was lots of problems with the design of the stadium, and so brought that to our attention, and we kind of triggered some limitations that we appeared to have. But I think it's unfortunate that Keith is not here to see the fact that his efforts has some fruition now, since he passed away within this past year. But so the point was, now that the NDSU has been charged with needing to create and improve the deficits there. So I just, that's the summary in the background. And questions from other commissioners about this, or reflections they may have had, or Bruce, if you want to come to the podium, we can welcome you as a new, you're relatively new, and maybe you'd want to introduce yourself as your tenure with the City of Fargo, and what your little summary of what your role is.
Thank you, Commissioners and Chairman. Bruce Tarleson, City of Fargo Inspections Department. I've been here 19 years, going on 20 now. I've kind of stepped through all different types of inspections. I've done rental, residential, commercial. I did plan reviews for commercial buildings, and now I'm in the director's position. Been doing this about 2 years. It was a slow phase in, and I did look back at this issue. I saw it in the news also. I took a look back. I ordered the plans, because we still had them in storage, and reviewed what I did, because I did the review on that building. I'll start out by a little comparison to what we do compared to ADA. ADA, maybe you know, it's a federal program. Compliance started back in the 70s with many, in all buildings, full compliance. It had phase in for existing buildings. And the Department of Justice is the enforcer of the ADA. So we don't have any role in the ADA. In fact, if somebody talks to us about ADA, we say that's something that we don't enforce. It can be a little different. There's different regulations in the ADA. So we talk ANSI. Started out, ANSI put out a book, American National Standard Institute, for accessibility. And it was design guidelines 4 buildings that were going to be remodeled or constructed. So we adopt the International Building Code, and the current edition is the 2018. We used the 2009 at that time, and this book will always reference the current standard we use for our ANSI book. And ICC has since then taken over ANSI, so it's now called ICC, A117.1. So this is the book we use when we review projects. So I went back and I looked at more of the major parts. I looked back at accessible seating, parking, and toilets. That's 3 of the biggies that we look at. And all of those were compliant on the plans. The quantities. So I did see some of the snippets on the news about how this came about, and I believe it started with somebody in a wheelchair needing a seat and always required to have a companion seat. They were all on the plans. There was 56 of them. They were spread out. So I do not know if ADA has the same criteria. I feel the Justice Department went in there now on the direction of the state of North Dakota and looked at it with a new eye to the current requirements, even though we looked at it with the 09 requirements. So it could be a little different. There may be additional requirements, but I know it's still accessible seating and a companion, and they were all shown on the plans. It's basically 2 levels. They put them down low, they put some up high. So there was really only 2 levels. I didn't think they were required to be interspersed in the levels of seating themselves. So I thought it complied. Now the architect for the project is required to comply with ADA. He must design the ADA. The state actually requires them to provide a written statement that they will comply with ADA, and that was done in this project. I wouldn't write a permit till I received that from the architect, that he was going to comply with the ADA. So we have that. So I don't know what his involvement in this is now, but the Justice Department always goes after the owner of the project to provide compliance. So that's what they've done. I did print out the report from the state of North Dakota Attorney General, and so I saw the items in there, and there's many of them, even handles on doors. So I don't like to say that we don't inspect everything on a building, because people think that we're trying to get out of work sometimes, but there are basically 4 things that we inspect in a building. We inspect foundation, framing, all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and a final inspection. There's no requirement in the building code for us to inspect accessible items. They should be constructed to code. We should be able to rely on that. If we had to inspect every handle, which the Justice Department did, they went and looked at all accessible handles on the doors, and they wrote those up. There were some slopes that didn't meet 8%. They were 8.6. So we don't go around with calculators and tools either. We eyeball, make sure, I mean, it looks like that was compliant. It was a little off. So they have agreed to change all that. I don't know how they're gonna have to redo ramps and expand them. I don't know if it'll work for them, but they said, so I'm sure they're going back to Stroh and say, can we make this work and find out how? So that's the difference between the two. Anything we see, we will bring up. If we looked at that ramp and it just doesn't look right, and most of our inspectors are close. If it's close, they're gonna walk. They'll walk a stair. They will walk a ramp. It feels good. It feels compliant. There's 4 different types of ramps you can have, so they usually know, but they will call it out or ask for the architect, give us the percents on this slope so we know that it's correct. So they'll bring up anything they see because it is in the code, but they don't necessarily inspect everything on a project.
Well, thank you. It's complicated.
It is very complicated, and we don't like that there's 2 different standards.
Yeah.
We have the ADA standard, we look at it, there's a few little details that are different, but International Code Council says if you use the ANSI standard and the federal government has agreed, that you are compliant with ADA. That's what they say. We know there's a few differences. We say you got to comply with this. They ask if they can comply with the ADA because it might be. No, we need this because we're always the same. Same requirements on every project. The state even has some requirements that I don't know if they're even enforced in Fargo or the architects are looking at all state laws pertinent. They have some requirements for the power paddles on buildings. And I believe if state law was required, every building would have a power paddle for a door. That's not in our code. It's never come up, but most public buildings, NDSU, city, state, county, they all put them on. It's just business. Do they need it or not? Any other questions?
I guess the positive thing here is that it's been noted, the corrections are being, the institution is being cooperative in making the changes, and I personally am looking at this as how do we learn from this situation so that it's not the best of worlds where something has to be corrected after the fact. If it can be caught early on and can be incorporated in, that would be the ideal thing. So what can we all be learning from this and figuring out going forward? So I think we're trying to educating ourselves as a commission to see what our role could be so that we could be on the proactive side rather than a reactive to situations. So thank you for your...
And any time that anybody has a question, and we have 3 commercial inspectors, we could send somebody out to check something. We normally do not go out unless we have a permit to inspect, but that doesn't mean we cannot. We've gone out and inspected, things have come to our attention. We've gone out and we look at the bowler. I think the building might be 50, 60 years old, never accessible. Somebody says, should this be? Well, that's one thing about the ADA requirements, and architects are supposed to look at this. If they have a requirement of, if you spend money on a building, a portion of it should go toward accessibility. So you can't keep spending hundreds of thousands and never bring it up to date. So that's a federal requirement. You spend $100,000, you should spend up to $20,000 on accessibility if you need it. No accessible toilets. So we kind of negotiate that sometimes. Somebody says, I want to add a toilet. Can I do this without kicking in all the other ones, And sometimes we get what we can get. They want to remove a toilet. Now there's a conflict. They're supposed to have 2. Would we rather have 1 accessible or 2? So we make decisions based on every circumstance in that case.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, when you say that, like, for example, if somebody qualifies for a Renaissance Zone tax incentive, and they're going to increase their property by 50% or whatever of their value they started with, do we have any ADA requirements in that?
Yes, so the basic way to look at that is anything anybody does should be compliant. So storefront, somebody does a storefront and they have a little door, we're going to say, nope, you're providing a new wall, a new door, you now need safety glazing, accessible compliant door. Issues come up like, it's the building with Toasted Frog in it, I believe. One of those 3 buildings, the floor was 2 foot elevated inside the building. So it always had to have, so there's things in the code such as structural, it's not capable of being done without taking up half the building, If they would be required to put a ramp in that building or an elevator, they just wouldn't do it. They would never update it. So we look at that. Technically infeasible is what's used. If they had to put a ramp in that floor in that building, it would, at 1 in 12 slope, it would take up half the floor space of the main level. So we're gonna say, yeah, that's technically infeasible to do that. Should they put an elevator in? That comes up a lot downtown. Two-story buildings, somebody rents out the main, and now they wanna rent the basement out. Is it accessible? We have discussions about that. But everything new that's done should be accessible. That door should be accessible, should have the clearances, both sides, the push-pull, everything should be correct. A new bathroom, that's why I say we negotiate sometimes. Toilet requirements are in the code. They need a certain amount of toilets. They need a men's and women's, or one, or more. So now somebody comes in and says, I would like to make an accessible one. Well, sometimes we'll give on that to get that accessibility for a space. The transgender issues comes up, and I've had architects ask me, can't we do that? Denver's doing that. And I like to say, we'll look at all those issues as they come forward. The code is very flexible about issues. It's got paragraphs in there about requesting alternative designs. So I've already stated, anytime anybody has to put in two, we can ignore the signage that you put on those. You can say to transgender, to unisex, whatever you want. We're going to allow you to put in two any way you want. I've had it said to me, women want men's to be men's and men's, because they want it separate. And I've told people, you can put the same signs on those doors. No, we want a men's. So everybody wants different things, but we'll be flexible on that. The only thing I've said with that issue is they have to be two. They have to be separate. We're not going to let you. The 2021 code is going to have transgender bathrooms in there, where if you're required to have 30 toilets, urinals, stalls, they can all be in one room. It's in the next code. We're going to order the book within the year. And you can have two doors going into one space with everybody able to go in there. So the code is caught up with that. There's an allowance for that.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing with that. We'll have you back.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we have our second item here is City of Fargo Land Development Code, and I know this was Commissioner Martin and staff who might, if you want to do any setting up the landscape for this one?
Yeah, I can. So for the last couple of years, I've kind of informally done surveys on residential codes in a few different cities in North Dakota. And what I found is when it comes to the occupancy code for single-family dwellings in Fargo, that we are lesser than the rest of the state of North Dakota. Grand Forks, Dickinson, Minot, and a few other cities all have 4 non-family members per unit, and in Fargo we have 3. And when I've talked to the city about it, they refer to parking is the issue for that. And I think that if you take a drive anywhere down North Fargo, you'll find that it doesn't matter. People are breaking the code anyways, both families who need more people to live in a home to be able to afford it, so I think it's an affordability issue, and then also college students as well. The other thing that came to mind was the language in special conditional use permits. There's some old school language in there on the way they refer to people with felony backgrounds. I don't have that with me today. I'm working with Michelle from High Plains Housing, and we're doing kind of I don't know if you want to call a formal or informal survey on that code, and we'll have something ready next month for the commission. And then we'll be looking into LGBTQ language as well, the discrimination with application fees, and then secret shoppers and what they're finding when they apply for housing, and what discrimination that they're coming across. And then the big one that we want to look into is tax breaks that developers are getting, and then in turn maybe discriminating against people with felony backgrounds or sex, religion, and stuff like that. So more or less, I'm just bringing this up today, that this is something that we're looking into between myself and the High Plains Housing, and we'll have something more ready next month.
And when you say we, I'm assuming F5?
F5 project,
Okay.
yep.
Thank you. Staff, anything extra to add?
No, just thank you. This is really helpful. It's good to hear the background too on how it's connecting with your other work, Adam. And maybe just as a note that we mentioned in our staff report is we recognize the land development code is somewhat outdated, which is right now we're doing, and there's many components of the land development code that besides this that we've been kind of wrestling with. And so we are in the works of doing a land development code, what we call a diagnostic. That report will be back out probably in June this year. And then we'll be looking at some recommendations to change the code of, to update the code in 2021. And so if I were sitting in your shoes, one of my first questions would be, why does this take so long? And I would say staff has probably about a 10-page list of single-spaced lines of things in our land development code that need to be modified. And so we would like to take a kind of a holistic approach to it. So, because there's a lot of unintended consequences, and the outdated reference to, I think, types of people in our land development code is an example of that. I think that was symptom to one edit that was maybe made about 6 or 7 years ago, and when we start making edits, sporadically throughout the code, we don't understand how they correlate through the whole system. And so that's why we want to take a look at this holistic approach and have some recommendations. So thank you for bringing this to our attention, and we look forward to hearing your report with Michelle as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm just curious, Nicole and whomever, would it help, for example, recently we've had Commissioner Gehrig advance 2 text amendments in the LDC potentially to consider. Is it proactively helpful to have a board or a commissioner to suggest that's a good idea to look at, or do you prefer to go through the vetting like you're doing and then surface and then we're hoping it gets there?
Personally, I prefer the vetting. Of course, I'm not going to tell the commissioners what to do, but just as advisory, basically what Commissioner Strand is referring to, there's been a couple other things related to guns and home occupation. We have 2 or 3 other home occupation issues. For instance, a guy wanting to do having bees in his backyard for honey harvesting or something like that. And, so there's all these details on the code that start doing the deep dive. And firearms is another one. And when you might saw in the newspaper, wind tunnel or wind turbines is another. And basically all we're doing when it goes to the City Commission is putting that back on our list. It's going on the same list that we have with the 10 other pages of single space lines. And so what we're doing is bringing all of that back to our consultant holistically. We've known about the group living has been a discussion for a while now. I know Moorhead, for instance, I think has 4. And I think the history of how we got to 3 is based on some neighborhood planning work we did way back when with NDSU. And so going back to your point of enforcement and tools and understanding all of that correlation of why we got where we are and modernizing those is certainly appreciative. And so kind of long-winded answer to your question, Commissioner Strand, certainly doesn't hurt, but at the same time, if you want to spend your time proactively, I'm not sure if that's really getting us anywhere.
I'd like to commend Adam for bringing this up to us, and I think we should all keep it on the forefront as a priority. These discussions are very far-reaching, but they're important. And if we want to, in criminal justice reform, get folks back into the community and get them functioning, they need jobs and they need housing. And then we have the neighborhood challenges of parking and density, but the time is ripe, and I can't wait till we get this done and we no longer have some of those phrases in our policies that are just so outdated and wrong today.
Maybe just add one quick, just because this will also be a good discussion as we develop the core neighborhood plan.
Exactly.
And so we'll add that. That'll be a topic of discussion as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for the conversation. Thank you, Adam. Number 3 was a religious discrimination complaint, and Abdulwali Sharif of Nasser had brought this to attention in terms of in a workplace kind of situation. Unfortunately, Abdulwali has an ill child today, is not able to be with us, but I noted here that staff identified a gap in low or no-cost legal services related to employment law. I don't know if there's anything further to comment or discuss on that at this point. No? Okay. We will hear more, I'm sure, when Abdulwali can present that to us.
And maybe, Chair, real quick, one of the goals too is we love the amount of activity that the commission is working towards, and we love being readily accessible to that. That's honestly one of the joys we have. And so one of the purposes of these memos is to help memorialize some of the things so everybody understands what topics are in the air and they know how to further participate. So I'm sure Abdulwali would appreciate any assistance in this matter as well. And it was a good kind of, you learn by doing, and so by us kind of digging into this topic, we start to learn more about what the issues, and I want to memorialize those so we can understand where those gaps are in our community and as it touches to our work plan.
Great, thank you. And then the final item, at least as listed in the paper or before us, is the discussion around the Native American Commission Sweat Lodge. This was information from me that the lodge had been hopefully temporarily closed. I know this was raised by Commissioner Severson. Any update or anything that for the good of the group, that we discuss on this? And I know you're concerned. We all are concerned that this is something that's had some rocky times.
I guess not that I'm aware of yet. Do we know if the Native American Commission has any updates on it?
Yeah, so it is very much a top of mind topic with the Native American Commission, working with Native American Commissioner Chelsea Snyder and our Vice Chair Whitney Fear and other members of our commission. Maybe in summary, we are looking to do some community outreach to have some, basically it was closed due to unsafe practices, and there was I guess members of the Native community who were not feeling comfortable using the facility, and with it being a city function, that created some concern, and we want to make sure people are safely practicing, especially this important spiritual practice. And so as such, the Native American Commission, based on our last conversations with them last week, have just asked for a little bit more time where we can learn a little bit more about how to develop that structure so that we can ensure safe practices. And we're looking at teaming up with, this is kind of new, we're looking at teaming up with the Native American Public Health Resource Group out of NDSU to help maybe lead some of those community-wide discussions. And so with any good community outreach, it's hard to rush it. And so we hope to have some really good dialogue to learn more about how we can best serve the community.
Thank you. All right, well, that closes, and this is, like I said, this was a new item that was added to our agenda, and whether or not we'll be spending the amount of time on each item as we did today, I like it personally. I think it's a way to kind of keep us all informed, and like you said, memorializes it so we don't lose these threads of things as they surface.
And a comment, maybe I like these reports a lot too. We saw it at community development this week, and it's great to have this tracking. I'm not so certain what we do with this, but it could be that this is included into our minutes because there's so much substance to it. It gives us a trackability of so many topics. I know it's extra, but it's really so significant to be able to know what's on your work plan.
Great, thank you. Staff items, anything that you would like to hold up on the staff items listed here?
I can just give a brief update on the MLK Day celebration. Thanks to all who helped out with the planning. It was a great success, and There were over 200 people who attended, so thank you.
You did a great job, and everybody else did a great job on that. The event is stepping up every year, the last few years especially. You have outside help structuring and organizing and communicating and planning it, and it just goes so well. Thank you for that.
And staff also just wanted to point out just some additional attachments that we have in your packet this month. So I know at previous meetings, commissioners sort of spoken about interest in learning about fair housing issues. So we have some information that the FM Coalition to End Homelessness just updated to their website about their Landlord Risk Mitigation Fund. So you can read a little bit about that in your packet. And also Planning Director Nicole Crutchfield a few meetings ago presented on the Planning Department's 2020 priorities. So that document is just a list of those priorities, but then with some descriptions and ways that commission members can get involved if they're interested.
Thank you. Any questions for staff on the work they're doing? And thank you for the fine work that the staff continues to do. I know that you have lots of balls in the air, and so we appreciate the support and help that you provide.
I have a quick question.
Please.
Zara. So I was having a conversation with some legislators about not necessarily the landlord risk mitigation fund, but the bill that got passed where it lets landlords charge double security deposits for people that they might have to take a risk on. Is that something that you guys are hearing a lot about in the city of Fargo? Nothing? Okay. Well, it was a bill that was passed through, and I thought it was interesting that people who would be considered high risk or have felony backgrounds, that they were able to legally charge them double security deposits if they were, which the whole point of a security deposit is that shouldn't be legal, to charge someone more money because they might, you know what I mean? And so I guess I haven't personally heard of any, but I know it was a bill that was passed through, and I'm not sure if the city of Fargo has like been cool with that kind of, I think it's discrimination.
I can't tell you how many people I've heard from over the years that feel like they get taken advantage of when they don't get their security deposits back.
Yeah, that too.
And it's rampant, some say. The practices, it's a lot of the same people, you know, and their excuses for not giving. So that at least I've heard of that for years.
Yeah.
I don't know how prevalent it is and how big a problem is, what our oversight is, capabilities are, but and then if you double the rents and then, or the deposits and then don't give them back.
Yeah.
I
find it really interesting that we create more opportunities for landlords and developers than we do the people we're trying to serve.
Do you know which bill offhand it was?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I know that a lot of legislators thought that they were creating an opportunity for those who are high risk, when it was really, when they don't get security deposits back anyway, that they were creating more money for owners, you know, along with application fees and stuff. It almost to the point where it's like, it's okay if you're a felon as long as you have money. And that's never been the issue. It's always been poverty driven. People coming out of prison or coming out of homeless shelters don't have enough money for a security deposit alone, and then once they get a double security deposit, they could have used that money for themselves, but yet it's going in the landlord's hands. So I don't, if you haven't seen that, I would just ask that let's be careful of that, because I think it's a form of discrimination that was legalized.
All right, thank you. We have one other item, which is the 2020 work plan that was sent out to us ahead of time, and some discussion. Surprise, surprise. We thought with our main speaker not being here today that we'd have all this extra time. Here we are, 6 minutes to 1. But normally what we do is we adjourn the meeting and then just gather to do a little bit more of an update on that. Are people prepared to stay a little bit after 1 today? Would that work? No?
I have a thing at 1:30.
No? We have quite a few that can't. Would you want, so we'll maybe dispense with that, but just if you could do an update in the 5 minutes we have before some commissioners have to leave, and then we'll certainly dedicate some time next month. Would anyone want to? Karen?
Yeah, I'll start and then just maybe pass it off to Karen here. Yeah, so maybe just a quick thing. One is as we were doing some email engagement about next steps on the work plan, we were starting to get some questions back from commissioners directly to staff, kind of trying, it looked to us, and we don't want to put words in your mouth, but it looked to us like you were already thinking strategically about how this might fit in the community, as well as what your role might be and how you can kind of dig in. And not to call Adam and Cody on the spot, but as new members too, it's like, what are we trying to do? And we're hearing this from other commissioners as well, and in other committees. And so the goal of the planning department framework, to talk about the planning department priorities and ways to be involved, that's just kind of ideas that staff had really right off the bat on if you want to dig into any of these topics that are of interest to you, like the land development code updates and things like that. We certainly welcome your participation. For instance, as we're getting ready to kick off our core neighborhood plan, we've asked Matur to sit on the steering committee to represent not only the Human Relations Commission, but his work and point of view from the work he does, but to help share that value from the Human Relations Commission on the core neighborhood plan on the overall steering committee. And so as we go into the work plan, what we did based on your feedback is, we have from our last few meetings, we had selected our kind of goals and first level of strategy. And so from a staff perspective, we did what we call kind of just these one-page summaries of what these activities might look like. So for instance, the discrimination complaint audit and work plan items, how could that, that's brought kind of 4 pages into the packet here. And so this is kind of new to you this cycle. The previous 4 pages are just reformatted materials you've already seen before. But like these work plan items, how would we dig into doing a discrimination complaint audit? What are some ways that we can be active, both from a staff member perspective and from a commissioner perspective? So these are just kind of us wandering out loud to help you find ways that you might want to engage. They don't these may meet, may not meet. We're really at this point welcome and open to anything you want to see as we dig into these topics and understand how it affects to the broader community as well. And so I'll just stop there. And Karen, if there's anything else you want to add.
I think that covers it, but I think what we would be looking for next steps would be for the commissioners to sort of review this, particularly those new actual work plan items for the strategies, and see where you personally would like to engage over the next year, 3 years as a commissioner, and sort of bring those ideas to the next meeting.
Maybe and I'll just close one quick thing is, what we're finding, so all of our boards and commissions that we staff are kind of in the same position where, maybe have been under a certain level of governance or in our work for the last 8 to 10 years, and especially, the Chair Barry Nelson has seen evolutions of different administrations in the City Hall, and so our question to you is really, what type of work do you as a commissioner want to do? Where do you feel like you want to affect impact to these strategies? And if these, again, are the wrong strategies, you also just need to let us know. And so I know we've just had intermittent 5-10 minute strategic plan meetings at the end of our board meetings to help find this. And I do like the work Karen did with kind of like with all good strategic planning, how do you know when you're done? And so that we can do the work. And so so she just kind of reformatted this to look somewhat like a report, so you're not dealing with all these just spreadsheets and things like that, and intermittent trying to collect all the material together in one place. So this packet represents all the work you've done for the course of the last 6 months, and tries to package it in a way that's easy to understand and get your head around. But we're certainly open to suggestions and discussions.
And may I clarify perhaps, if people did come today prepared to declare what areas they're interested in, I would guess that would be acceptable to let you know as staff where you would like to land.
Absolutely.
Okay, and maybe we could do that after the meeting, but I would encourage you to do that. We don't have to be delaying that if you're ready to go. So, other questions for staff on this?
Not a question, but Nicole, this is again showing some real substantial evolution of your structure in your department since you've taken it over and you've gotten your people in place in the last couple of years. A thought that occurs to me is when you, for this commission or other boards and commissions, kind of get them finalized, then let's look for a quieter agenda night for the city commission, and on a given night, present the Human Relations Commission's strategic plans, updates, and share it with the entire city commission and community, and have the members there so we can introduce them to the audience and let them see where, because a lot of times people go, well, what do you do? Or they don't know where, and we don't, but so that would help them too on the other side of this, see where the authorities
Absolutely.
lie and the directions are going.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And that's one of our goals, maybe to piggyback on that, both independently, time for the Human Relations Commission to present that directly to the City Commission, but then also universally, how does this work tie together? So one of the things we're hoping to do this quarter yet is kind of a year-end report from 2019 and a progression into 2020, what our work tends to be. And maybe this is a way to, I know you guys all need to leave, but one of the things that's coming forward that we're looking at, so it's probably no surprise, we might be going to a flood declaration here next week, but after that period of time, we're hoping that in April, per se, our April, May area, I would like to do some collective gathering of all of our boards and commissions, because I think if you see each other, like I'll just comment to Cody, he knows members of the Native American Commission, and I think these kind of cross-pollination of, as these, I think that would be really exciting to have these cross-pollination meetings, collective meetings to talk about how you can impact together your work, because I see everybody working so hard, and how can we amplify that work?
Thank you. Thank you all. Anything else for the good of the group? Hearing none, we can. Yes.
Bear with me. We have two members of our Human Relations Commission running for legislature, the state legislature. Letitia Hellerud and Hamida Kane. They've announced their candidacies for public office, and to have them from our board and getting positioned into the community and going out to that type of public service, it's great.
Speaking about stepping up as leadership, in leaders. Thank you, John, for acknowledging that. And we'll have to congratulate them in person when we see them. All right, thank you. Consider the meeting adjourned.
Thank you.